In one of the only weeks during the year that has minimal cricket, the cricket tragics like myself have been blessed with the news of a secret billion-dollar worldwide T20 league that promises to rescue smaller nations financially struggling and save Test cricket as a whole. Some would ask, can you trust an investment group linked to the Saudi Arabia's trillion-dollar wealth fund that has seemingly invested huge amounts of money into other sports to try get a foot in the door? Others would say if anyone has the money to save the sport despite potentially huge financial losses and a logistical nightmare, it's them. But the realists would say it's just a concept that will ultimately get shut down by the ICC before it even gets off the ground, and they are probably correct given the current situation, but that's why we are here to discuss it. Oh, and Pakistan managed to get bowled out for 91. Though in one of the most dull weeks of cricket in probably months, we've actually got a lot to talk about, from the IPL starting, the IPL potentially banning BROOK, Pakistan getting dusted by New Zealand, and also the uncovering of a worldwide T20 league, which I want to talk about first because they are ringing all the right bells when it comes to talking about important issues such as Test cricket not being sustainable outside the big three, and also smaller nations struggling financially and playing unsustainable cricket. But just like any concept, they usually sound great when they're in the works, but they hardly ever work out, or it ends up like the Champions Trophy and completely changes from its original intention. In saying that, we haven't seen the swinging power of the Saudis in the sport before, but we have seen how aggressive they have been in other sports. They've already put their feet in multiple sports, from football in the Saudi League, getting Ronaldo over and obviously getting so many star players over now, and also earning hosting rights to a World Cup. They also now have a Formula 1 race every single year. They have invested in boxing, in MMA, they've got the PFL League. They have the Live Golf, which they've set up to rival the PGA. I mean, that is a huge task in itself, and they are already making leaps and bounds within years. So obviously they aren't scared to make moves, and they're pretty happy to make them quickly. And according to this amazing article from Chris Barrett from the Sydney Morning Herald, SRJ Sports Investments from Saudi Arabia along with the kingdom are prepared to spend 800 million Australian dollars, which is about 500 million US dollars and slightly less in pounds. India has an insanely difficult and confusing currency to convert to, so I'm just going to say that Stark's IPL contract was worth 4.4 million. So Saudi Arabia are ready to inject 181.8181 Mitch Starks into this league. And the ideas that they have for this league are pretty insane. Also, just quickly before we get into the important details about this league, I just want to say thank you. And if you are enjoying these long videos, please subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And also, we are on Spotify audio and video. That means you can switch between both. It is very, very convenient. So if you want that convenience, head over to Spotify under the exact same name, and that way you can enjoy the convenience of both. So what actually is this league? A lot of the information that I'm conveying here is from an article published by Chris Barrett from the Sydney Morning Herald. So if you want to read of all the finer details, definitely have a look there. It's a great article and a great read. But essentially what it's going to look like is it's going to be an 8-team league that's almost going to play out like Grand Slams in tennis. So there's going to be 4 big events throughout the year. Each event will be at a different location around the world. Now, the locations are yet to be announced, but I presume they would include India, Australia, and England, just due to the crowds they'll receive and also probably more so the sponsorship money that they're going to get. But who knows, they might pull a sneaky and be like some of the T10 leagues, put it in the Cayman Islands and avoid all the taxes. There is nothing confirmed. The idea for the league was created by an ex-New South Wales and Victoria all-rounder, Neil Maxwell. He played in the 90s and also represented Fiji for a while, but now he does a variety of things. He was an agent for players like Brett Lee. He's an agent for Pat Cummins at the moment. He was a CEO of a marketing firm. He was CEO of Punjab Kings 11 at some point. He helped start the T20 League over in the USA. And I guess most importantly, he was a board member of Cricket New South Wales and also the Australian Cricketers Association, who have actually partnered with him in developing this. So that's where the idea was created. Now we get to the controversial part, which has everyone talking about, and that is where the league is getting funded by. Now, of course, the league is going to have to be funded externally, especially with an idea like this. We are yet to hear about the majority of the investors, but we know that the largest backer, as mentioned before, are SRJ Sports Investment. Now, they are Saudi-based, and they are literally an organization established established by the Saudi Public Investment Fund in 2023. So the sovereign wealth fund worth over $1 trillion, they are a branch of that. They are the sports branch that invest into different sports. I'm not even going to try convert that into Mitch Starks, how much that is worth, but what I'm trying to say is they do quite literally have endless money, and they are frugal in their spending in what we've seen. Also, funnily enough, their CEO is actually an Aussie, Danny Townsend, who played football professionally in Australia and was CEO of professional football team Sydney FC before obviously probably getting a nice pay bump over to SRJ. Both Maxwell and Townsend have stayed silent on this matter and on the scheduling, but according to various sources inside, they plan to play it within vacant windows of domestic and international scheduling. Which, if you saw my last video and just in general my videos over the last few years, you already know how I feel on the scheduling, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but that will be interesting. The teams are going to be made up of complete new franchises based in both cricketing nations like Australia and India, and apparently in Newmarket, which is very open-ended. So I don't know if that's going to be a smaller nation getting to host, or who knows, maybe the Icelandic cricket team, after slaving away on Twitter for 5 years, are somehow going to get involved. So there's the details about the tournament, who's investing in it, but I want to talk about what is the purpose, will it help, and what pushback are we going to get, and is it even going to happen? So the whole idea behind this league is that it's going to be used as an alternate source of income that is completely separate from the current funding model. Now, I've spoke about the current funding model on this channel before. I'm sure you've seen the pie chart online before. I'll probably put it in here somewhere if you haven't as well. But as you guys probably already know, the current revenue split, although it may seem fair because India, Australia, and England bring in the most money, therefore they should receive the most money, the splits are very, very harsh against the smaller nations. And in fact, it's very hard for these smaller nations to even set up a model that will allow them to become profitable, to earn more revenue, to then get a larger slice of that pie chart, to get a larger slice of that revenue. So those smaller nations are essentially screwed under this current model. So with this league, it will be completely separate to that model. So whether they're going to get the smaller nations involved in the teams or to host, it still seems very unclear. But what they have made clear is that there will be direct funding towards those smaller nations. That will be outside the split. That way it can be really beneficial for these smaller nations that would otherwise not be able to create this kind of revenue. Hopefully that also addresses their other main objective, which is making test cricket sustainable outside the big three nations, because currently, if you're not England, you're not Australia, not India, you are losing money, whether it's touring overseas or even hosting tours. You are not making money, so they really want to address that problem. So let's talk about the major problems with this league. And obviously, for anything to happen, it's going to need to be approved by various boards, but ultimately it's going to come down to the ICC. And the head of ICC is Jay Shah, who was also BCCI's secretary only a couple of months ago. At the moment, the current setup in India, BCCI bans all Indians from playing in any other T20 leagues apart from the IPL. It's been that way for as long as I can remember, at least since I think it's always been that way, actually. It's actually really interesting because that does tie into the Harry Brook ban, which I'll be talking about later. But India has always kept Indian players on Indian soil. So obviously the ICC would have to convince the BCCI to remove a ban that's been in place for a long, long time. Then you've also got issues such as the scheduling and the ethics and the morals. In terms of the scheduling, again, I don't need to harp on too much, but we know how bad the scheduling is. From my last video with Australian players having to leave first class early to go play in the IPL, to South Africa sending a complete second 11 to New Zealand so their players could play in the SA to generate enough revenue to play tests, to even Australia, they just lost their first class grand final to the AFL, to a complete different sport. I mean, every single week we are seeing scheduling issues all around the world. They are not able to fit these games in without losing players left, right, and center. So the fact that then we're going to require 4 chunks throughout the year where all-star players from all countries are expected to go and play around the world. I just cannot see a way that they can fit it into the current schedule without removing existing tournaments or overlapping current tournaments. Whether they rejig the schedule to fit it in, that would be amazing, but in this current state, I see absolutely no way they're going to fit in 4 big tournaments throughout the year, every single year. And then the second glaring issue, which has happened to every sport that the Saudis have got involved in, is the moral ethical issue, which I guess is already littered in cricket, so it would feel a bit weird if we then go out accusing Saudis when I feel like there is so much political tension and always politics involved in cricket. But of course, the human rights, the sport washing accusations that come with Saudis investing into sports. Obviously, with the football, was a huge uproar when the Saudi league started going up and they were getting all the European players to go across. In Live Golf, there was a huge standoff between players, between organisations. Players were getting berated. So I do wonder if they were to create a league in cricket, would players opting to play in that league get absolutely slammed by media and fans? It is something to think about, and I'm sure it's something the ICC will think about before implementing anything. Ultimately, I originally thought there would just be no way this will get over the line, and purely because India. I'm sorry, Indian fans, and this is not even a dig at India, but I just mean the way that the IPL is so successful, every player is fighting to get a contract to play in the IPL, the way that India gets such a good cut from the split, the current revenue model. I just find it really hard for the BCCI to willingly let some other big hitter come in with heaps of money, take a slice, and obviously they're probably going to try have an impact and stay involved in cricket. So at first, I thought there was absolutely no way. But at the same time, the most recent IPL auction, where did that take place? Saudi Arabia. So obviously, someone within cricket has pulling power. Someone is connected within cricket. Otherwise, Saudi Arabia would have never hosted the IPL. So I actually think there's way more of a possibility of this happening than I originally thought. So this is actually a perfect segue back into the IPL and to talk about Harry Brook's ban. Now, if you haven't heard about Harry Brook, he has pulled out of the IPL for a second year in the row for reasons unspecified, but not for an issue with his family or not an injury. Now, the reason I say this is because late September 2024, the IPL announced 2-year bans for international players that pull out of the tournament after being bought without a legitimate reason. And unfortunately for Harry Brook, what looks to be a mental health reset, a little recharge, doesn't fall under that bracket, and now he is looking down the barrel of a 2-year ban, and for some reason there's massive amounts of uproar. If I'm giving my honest opinion, I actually don't side with Harry Brook. I actually think the IPL is completely within their rights to implement a rule that they announced over 6 months ago to prevent stuff like this happening, and for a few reasons. Firstly, when a player of Harry Brook's caliber pulls out that late, the team is going to suffer. Obviously, they then are left stranded. They're going to have to try either get an emergency replacement in, or they're going to have to promote someone. They're then going to have to reshuffle the team. So the team is left stranded a little. And then secondly, Harry Brook is a star player and they want to keep their best players for their competition. And I completely get that. I mean, with the Big Bash every year, and you see Australians complaining all over social media, every single year we get international stars coming and playing the Big Bash. And then they all piss off after 3 games and they go play for another franchise that is going to pay them 10 times better. By the time finals come around, we have half the teams playing. I mean, I think the IPL is completely right to want to keep their star players, and this is just another way of ensuring it. I mean, I would feel sorry for Harry Brook if this rule was implemented last week, for example, and he was already going to pull out. The rule has just been implemented and he kind of gets stitched up by it. But this has been a rule now for 6 months. We knew about this rule well before the auction, so he kind of only has himself to blame. Now look, all countries, if they had the ability to do what India does, they would do exactly what they are doing. All countries want their best players playing for their leagues. I mean, England were doing the same with the MLC. If any of the English players were going to play in America, they were banning them from playing in England, I'm pretty sure. So we're seeing heaps of people upset online, but I honestly think the IPL is just doing what they think's best to ensure they have the best league possible, and I honestly don't blame them for that. So we ended up waffling on for a little too long, so I won't go too in depth about the Pakistan game, and I was also worried that I'm recording right as the second game is being played, and if Pakistan go and score 300, all my jokes about Pakistan getting bowled out for 90 would turn a little awkward. But in saying that, they've just gone down they've just gone to 2 for 19, so I might actually be safe. But Wow, what a first game after the Champions Trophy, hey? All out for 91, which was their lowest total in New Zealand. They were 4 for 11. Both openers gone for a duck for the first time in a decade. I'm not sure if they were dropping with Rizwan and BABBYY just to give them a bit of a rest, or if it was to experiment with the team a little, but I don't think Pakistan should worry all too much. And it's a little bit of a similar story to my one with New Zealand losing the Champions Trophy final to India. I think Pakistan are just coming up against a better side, an all-rounded side that are playing in their home conditions, the perfect conditions, while you're in trying times experimenting with new players and trying to get a grip on a new team. Everything that your eyes are saying when you're watching the screen is saying this is horrible, this is ugly, but I think it's actually necessary and not as bad as it looks. Of all times that you want to experiment with the team, it's probably right after a big tournament and when a big tournament's a long way away. And now is the perfect period. If you're going to experiment with your team, if you want to get some debutantes in, now is the time to do it. So Pakistan fans, my heart goes out for you. It's rough on the eyes. We've all been there. Every sports fan has been there, but just hold out. I promise it should get better, right? It has to get better, right? So that about wraps it up. The IPL starts on Sunday, so I'll have a full-length video on Monday talking about the IPL and also talking about more in depth who I want to support. I'm still not sure. I don't know if it's the lack of international cricket or the fact that it is the biggest T20 tournament in the world, but I'm really excited for this year's IPL. So I will see you all on Monday. I am very hyped.